Ever heard of a superpower, like completely vanishing from history, only to be rediscovered centuries later?
It's like a whisper from the past, right?
Exactly. And this time, we're diving into the mystery of the Hittites.
A civilization every bit as mighty as ancient Egypt, but shrouded in mystery for, like, centuries.
And get this, they even battled pharaohs. Might even have something to do with the whole Trojan War.
Oh, and their laws. Let's just say they'll make you wonder about, what justice really meant back then.
We're talking epic battles, lost cities, and a legal system that's both fascinating and a little bit terrifying.
You're gonna love this one.
And our guide for this deep dive is Hittites, a Bronze Age civilization, a treasure trove of insights into this forgotten superpower.
It's amazing how they were completely lost to time. The Bible even gets them wrong. Yeah. It's like they were this major power, and then poof, gone. Reduced to just a footnote.
Wow. So how did they go from ruling an empire to, like, a historical blip?
That's the million-dollar question. Their rediscovery in the 19th century really shook up our whole view of the Bronze Age.
I bet. So where do we even begin with a civilization that was practically erased from history?
Well, it all starts with their meticulously kept records, cuneiform tablets. It's like cracking a code to unlock a whole civilization.
Talk about a story waiting to be told. It all began with a bit of a mix-up, right? A Frenchman named Charles Texier stumbles upon their lost capital, Hattusa.
The allure of ancient Rome was strong back then. Most explorers were obsessed with it. Texier, though, he had this thirst for the unknown.
Good thing, too. Imagine if he just wandered off looking for, like, some lost Roman bathhouse.
Right. Thankfully, he was intrigued by these whispers he'd heard from locals about Hattusa.
So he finds this sprawling city nestled in the mountains, right? Sees these massive stone blocks, towering walls, carvings of people with the most bizarre pointy-toed shoes you've ever seen.
Then he realizes,
Yeah,
this is no Roman city.
this is something else entirely.
He'd stumbled upon a civilization lost to time. And those cuneiform tablets he found, that was the real turning point.
Okay, hold on. Let's rewind a bit before we decode those tablets. Where did the Hittites even come from?
Before the Hittites, there were the Hashins, the indigenous people of the region. Think of them as the foundation upon which the Hittite Empire would be built.
So not just some pushover tribe, then?
Not at all. Skilled artisans, traders, their networks reached as far as Mesopotamia. And they had this deep respect for their environment.
Interesting. But then in come the Hittites, an Indo-European group. Right, migrating from the Eurasian steppes. What, around the turn of the second millennium BC?
And that's crucial, that Indo-European background. It really shaped their language and culture, set them apart from the Hashins. Some might argue that it even played a part in their rise to power.
It's like inheriting this whole cultural toolkit, right?
Yeah.
And using it to reshape a whole region.
Exactly. And they were led by a king named Anita, a name that would become legendary, both for conquest and for a strange twist of fate. You see, he conquered Hattusa.
Yeah, as you do.
But then, in a moment of fury, he cursed the city, declared that no one should ever rebuild it.
Talk about tempting fate.
Right. And guess what? It was his own descendant, a king named Lubarna, who would end up defying that very curse. A few centuries later, Lubarna decides to rebuild Hattusa. And by doing so, he's not just establishing a city, he's forging an empire. The Hittite kingdom.
So did the Hittites just sweep in and completely wipe out the Hashan culture?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Conquerors and all that. But no, the Hittites were surprisingly savvy.
How so?
Instead of obliterating everything, they embraced parts of Hashan culture, adopted their language, incorporated their deities into their own pantheon, even kept some of their art.
Smart move. It's like they understood that to build a lasting empire, you need more than just brute force.
Precisely. It's a pattern we see throughout history. Successful empires, the Romans, the Mongols, they all understood that. It's about cultural integration.
So they had the strength, but they also had, like, this cultural finesse. But what was life actually like in this early Hittite kingdom?
Well, remember those cuneiform tablets? They paint a picture of a surprisingly advanced society. The Hittites developed a complex legal system, had rich religious practices, a deep appreciation for the arts. They were much more than just warriors.
Give us the details. What kind of laws are we talking about?
Well, unlike some of their neighbors who were, shall we say, a bit more into the whole eye for an eye thing.
A bit brutal.
Just a tad.
Yeah.
The Hittites preferred fines, restitution. They understood that maintaining order didn't always require extreme measures.
So less off with their heads and more pay the price. Sounds almost civilized.
Almost. But there were some quirky ones. For instance, imagine being the chef who served the king spoiled food. Let's just say the punishment was a bit, well, unsavory.
Okay, I think I get the picture. Sounds like even the weird laws tell us something about their values, right? Order, cleanliness.
Exactly. And their legal code. It gives us fascinating insights into their religious beliefs. They believe they lived in a land populated by 1,000 gods.
The land of 1,000 gods. That's a lot of deities to keep track of. What was it about their religion that made it so unique?
What's remarkable is their inclusivity. They didn't force their beliefs on the people they conquered. Instead, they often incorporated the gods of those they encountered into their own pantheon. Can you imagine? A religious landscape that's constantly evolving.
So the opposite of religious intolerance. That's fascinating.
It is. And it wasn't just the big-name gods they focused on. Everything in nature, trees, rivers, even rocks they believed, all of it had a spirit.
A very nature-based spirituality. Did that reverence for nature influence their daily lives?
Absolutely. Their rituals, festivals, even their understanding of kingship was tied to it.
It's like this whole holistic system. So we've got Labarna setting up a dynasty. They're doing a pretty good job keeping things stable, but as with all good things,
It couldn't last forever.
and that brings us to what's known as the Middle Kingdom period, right?
Exactly.
So what were the Hittites up against as they moved into this new era?
For one, they had new, ambitious neighbors to deal with.
Right.
To the north, the Casca, fierce raiders, swooping down from the mountains, much like the Hittites themselves had a few centuries earlier.
Karma, right.
Something like that. And then to the southeast, you had the Mitanni and Indo-Aryan group. They were quickly becoming a force to be reckoned with.
So double trouble. What made the Mitanni so powerful?
Well, they had a strong military and their chariot forces. They rivaled those of the Hittites, which was saying something.
So external threats on multiple fronts. But it wasn't just what was happening outside their borders that caused trouble, right?
Sadly, no. Internal struggles were a constant theme for the Hittites during this period.
What were they dealing with?
Assassinations, revolts, power grabs, you name it. The fight for control within the Hittite court was brutal. Remember that curse on Hattusa? Some might say bad luck followed them anyway.
A recipe for disaster, really. Internal strife and external threats.
And yet, even amidst all that chaos, there were some incredible moments. Marsili VIII, for example, he actually managed to stack Babylon.
Wow, talk about a power move.
Right, but in a classic case of what goes up must come down, the Hittites were pushed back. Their empire shrunk. Their grip on power weakened.
It really shows you how even the mightiest empires can be incredibly fragile. So how did the Hittites pull themselves back from the brink after a period like that?
Pull themselves back. They did more than that. They rose to even greater heights.
Comeback story of the century.
This is where things get really interesting. It all starts with a new king, Suppiluliuma I. Talk about a dramatic entrance.
Suppiluliuma I. Now that's a name you don't forget. What makes him stand out?
Well, imagine inheriting a kingdom in chaos, enemies everywhere. But Suppiluliuma, he had this incredible strategic mind and the heart of a warrior. He knew the old ways wouldn't cut it.
So what did he do?
2 words, total transformation. He built one of the most powerful armies the world had ever seen.
And those legendary Hittite chariots, right?
Oh, they were more than just legends. While other civilizations were still using 2-man chariots, the Hittites, they added a 3rd man.
A 3rd man? What for?
An extra spear thrower. Imagine the impact, the chaos in the middle of a battle.
Talk about a game changer.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about the numbers. These chariots, they were marvels of engineering. We're talking rigorous training, mock battles, intricate formations.
They sound almost unstoppable.
Almost. Their first target, the Mitanni. Remember them. Suppiluliuma took them down, conquered their capital, Washikani.
So much for those rival.
Gone. Suppiluliuma, he wasn't just content with pushing them back this time. He had a bigger plan.
I'm sensing an emperor vibe here.
He wanted a lasting empire.
Yeah.
So what'd he do? He conquered, yes, but he also installed loyal rulers in the lands he subdued, created this whole network of vassal states stretching all the way from the Aegean Sea to the borders of Egypt.
From king to kingmaker, a true emperor.
Exactly, this client-state system. It allowed the Hittites to control a vast area without having to directly manage everything. And it worked. This was the dawn of a golden age for the Hittites.
So what was life like in Hattusa at this time? I'm picturing bustling streets, merchants from far-off lands, exotic goods.
Hattusa was the heart of it all. Trade flourished, diplomacy was in full swing. Imagine spices from the east, textiles, gold.
A true crossroads of the ancient world. And at the center of it all, the royal palace of Hattusa.
A symbol of Hittite power and architectural genius.
But it wasn't all just about wealth and grandeur, right?
You're right. Hattusa was a center of learning, too. Scribes were hard at work, recording history, literature, legal codes, all on those clay tablets we keep talking about.
Those tablets really are the gift that keeps on giving. You mentioned legal codes. Did Suppiluliuma make any big changes on that front?
He did. He codified and refined Hittite law. Wanted one unified system across his empire. But what's really fascinating is his personal philosophy on justice. Even when someone wronged him, he still believed in a fair trial.
That's pretty remarkable for any ruler, let alone one in the ancient world. What drove that?
Suppiluliuma understood true power wasn't just about military might. He knew a just and stable society was key. By ensuring fairness, he built loyalty among his subjects, a much better strategy than ruling by fear alone.
A wise ruler and a champion of justice. Suppiluliuma really does seem ahead of his time, but even golden ages have to end, don't they?
Sadly, you're right, and for the Hittites. A new challenge was brewing down south.
Uh-oh, let me guess. Egypt.
Bingo. Egypt was back with a vengeance under their new pharaoh, Ramesses II.
Ah, Ramses II. A name that practically screams Egyptian power. This is where we get that epic clash of civilizations, right?
You bet. Remember Kadesh, that strategically vital city Suppiluliuma conquered?
Gateway to those crucial trade routes.
The one and only. Well, Ramesses II, he wanted it back.
I can't say I blame him. It was a pretty sweet spot.
And Ramesses, young, ambitious, eager to prove himself, he saw retaking Kadesh as his chance to restore Egypt to its former glory.
So how did this Clash of the Titans go down?
Picture this. Ramesses marches towards Kadesh with a massive army. We're talking tens of thousands of soldiers, chariots, the whole shebang.
Wow, talk about a show of force. This wasn't just a border skirmish. This was a clash of empires.
Exactly. And the stakes, sky high. Control of Kadesh meant controlling the flow of trade and resources, but it was bigger than that too. This was about prestige, legacy, who would rule supreme.
So who throws the first punch?
While Ramesses, in his eagerness to catch the Hittites off guard, he splits his army.
Uh-oh, I've seen enough movies to know that's usually not a good sign.
It's a classic blunder. He races ahead with his best division, leaving the rest of his forces to catch up.
Risky. But what are the Hittites doing while all this is going on?
The Hittite king, Muwatalli II. He's no fool. He knows the Egyptians are coming, and he's ready for them. Gathers a massive army of his own, calls in allies from across the empire.
This is it, the showdown. So what happens? Give us the blow-by-blow.
Ramesses, fooled by some clever Hittite spies, he thinks the Hittite army is further away than it actually is. Sets up camp near Kadesh, completely unaware he's walked straight into a trap.
No way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And just as Ramesses and his guys are settling in, thinking they're about to win it all, bam, the Hittites attack.
I bet Ramesses regretted that whole split the army move right about then.
Probably. And this wasn't just any attack. The Hittites unleashed their full chariot force. 3,000 chariots.
3,000. I'm getting chills just imagining it.
Yeah.
So how did the Egyptians survive that?
Let's just say Ramesses was lucky that day. Just as the Hittites were about to overrun them, another Egyptian division arrived, caught the Hittites by surprise, pushed them back.
Talk about a close call.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
So who won the Battle of Kadesh? Well, it depends on who you ask.
I'm sensing some propaganda at play here.
Both sides claimed victory.
Of course they did.
The Egyptians played up Ramesses' bravery, talked about the heroic arrival of their reinforcements. The Hittites, they focused on their initial attack, how they completely took the Egyptians by surprise.
Everyone wants to be on the winning side, even if the truth is a little more complicated. So, looking back, who really won the day?
In reality, it was a stalemate. Brutal for both sides, but neither one could claim a decisive victory. The aftermath tells the real story.
What happened after the dust settled?
Ramesses. He hightailed it back to Egypt, leaving Kadesh in Hittite hands.
I guess actions speak louder than propaganda.
Exactly. But here's where things get really interesting. After years of bloody conflict, the Hittites and the Egyptians made a decision that would change everything.
Let me guess. They finally decided to talk it out.
They did, and they hammered out one of the most significant peace treaties in the ancient world, the Treaty of Kadesh.
So, the Hittite Empire is crumbling. Hattusa, their grand capital, is in ruins. What's left of them? It's like trying to piece together a shattered vase, isn't it?
It really is. But here's the amazing thing. The Hittites were resilient. Even with all that chaos and destruction, Their spirit lived on.
You keep saying transformation. How so?
Well, when Hattusa fell, not all the Hittites just gave up. Many of them escaped south to what we now call Syria.
A bit of a Hittite exodus, then.
Exactly. And they founded new kingdoms there. Smaller, of course, independent, but they still held on to their shared Hittite heritage. These became known as the Neo-Hittite states.
So like a phoenix rising from the ashes, kind of. Did these Neo-Hittite states manage to preserve the old ways, the Hittite culture?
In a way, yes. They weren't a direct continuation of the empire, of course, but they kept parts of the Hittite language alive, their artistic styles, even some of their religious practices, these little pockets of Hittite culture scattered throughout the region.
It's incredible how even in the face of utter collapse, culture finds a way to survive.
It's true. But the Neo-Hittites weren't the only way the Hittite legacy lived on. Remember those cuneiform tablets we talked about?
The ones that started it all?
Those very same ones. They're more than just records. They're the reason we even know about the Hittites today.
It's like finding a time capsule, getting to read about their laws, their beliefs, even their gossip.
We've learned so much from those tablets, their legal codes, how they ran their government, details about their daily lives, their religious rituals. They even wrote letters to each other.
Like finding a message in a bottle sent from thousands of years ago?
It's really incredible. And we're still deciphering new tablets all the time. The study of the Hittites is an ongoing process, always revealing something new.
It makes you wonder what else is out there waiting to be discovered. What if those untranslated tablets hold even more secrets? Like, what if there's a Hittite account of the Trojan War? Imagine reading their side of the story.
Wouldn't that be amazing? To see the Trojan War through Hittite eyes. Their perspective would be invaluable.
A whole new chapter in a story we thought we knew. But even without those potential discoveries, it's clear the Hittites were a remarkable civilization. Their impact on history is undeniable.
Absolutely. They were innovative warriors, savvy diplomats. They even had a surprisingly advanced legal system for their time. The Hittites left their mark on the ancient world, that's for sure.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Hittite world, what are some key things you hope our listeners will take away from all of this?
Well, first, I hope they remember that even the greatest empires can fall. The Hittites were powerful, adaptable, but in the end, they couldn't withstand the pressures of their time. It reminds us that history is unpredictable, full of twists and turns.
It's a good reminder that nothing lasts forever.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the Hittites also show us that even in a world often defined by war, peace is possible. That whole treaty with the Egyptians, the Treaty of Kadesh, it was a remarkable achievement. They chose diplomacy over endless conflict.
A powerful message, even today.
And finally, I want our listeners to appreciate the enduring legacy of the Hittites. They were incredible builders, thinkers, artists. We owe them a debt of gratitude for the knowledge and beauty they left behind.
A civilization lost, rediscovered, and now, thanks to dedicated scholars and those amazing cuneiform tablets, understood in ways we never thought possible. It's been a privilege to explore their world. And for our listeners, if you're as captivated by the Hittites as we are, there is a whole world out there just waiting to be discovered. So keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you on our next deep dive into the mysteries of the past.